All right, well, welcome everybody to our CA design presentation. I am here with my partner in crime, Aaron Sagray. My name is Albert Tan, and I'm a director of user experience, and Aaron is a senior principal of UX design. And today what we thought we would do is have a conversation, this workshop, answering this question, what should we build, right? This is a question that we often get. And we thought we would go through some of the basics of how we do that here at CA. So what we're going to cover are some of the principles, specifically of onboarding, and I'll get to why onboarding in a moment. We're going to talk a little bit about co-design and actually do a fun little exercise in which we're going to walk through a process for building a product based on some of the principles. And then we're going to share a real world example of how we here at CA are using some of these principles in a product. This is a 1990s Honda Accord. It is one of the most popular sold vehicles of all time, certainly for its time in the 90s. And its claim to fame is also it's one of the most stolen vehicles of all time as well. And at the time, right, it was a great car. It got the job done. It really appealed to the needs and, maybe the tastes of the buyers then. It was easy to maintain. But in 2018, I think we can all agree that this is just not going to cut it. Now, unfortunately, I think this is what a lot of enterprise software still feels and maybe even looks like, right? It gets the job done and it's certainly very functional. But there have been a lot of advancements, certainly since then, and there's obviously opportunity to improve. This is the 2018 Acura NSX. Same company, right? But obviously has a lot going for it that's very different, right? And so it's clearly modern. There have been a few performance tweaks. It's a lot more efficient, right? All of these two things are using technology, whether in materials or in science, engineering. And at the end of the day, right, the driving experience has really been focused on. Now, while some of those advancements have been very noticeable and obvious, what's actually more interesting when you look at it from a design perspective are a few things that are what made and allowed those things to actually happen. So one of the first important aspects of it is a vision. Having a vision to go from what you saw before to the future requires obviously a direction and conviction that, hey, this is where we want to go. The second thing, right, is a desire to actually evolve. Right? This is something that I think we certainly see in enterprise where it's like, well, it's functional. We can't break it. Let's not think about the future as quickly as we possibly should. And certainly startups in this industry and in this field are starting to break that notion and causing a lot of very interesting change in a very dynamic, fast-moving environment as a result. The third area and growth is this idea of investment. Right? You need to be able to, you may have a vision and you may have a desire to evolve, but if you're not willing to put in the time and resources, so again, the investment is not necessarily measured in terms of dollars, but also not being beholden to a artificial deadline and giving creativity and innovation the space and time needed to truly bring something amazing to market. And finally, probably the most important thing is certainly in terms of an investment, is being able to bring the right talent. Because I think you'll all agree that you may have all of the components necessary to deliver something amazing, but if you don't have the right talent to be able to bring it to you, it's not really going to go very far. So to bring the comparison a little bit closer, this is the current model of the Honda Accord. And while it's certainly not as advanced or as, sexy, if you will, as the NSX from a sports car perspective, what is interesting, and an interesting analogy to what we do in software, is that several of the pieces of technology and engineering that were developed as a result of the NSX have actually made its way into this vehicle, right? And so the engineering may have been developed for a particular application, but in 2018 and certainly in the world of modern software, a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that benefit can be applied across in different areas. I love this quote by Albert Einstein. We can't solve problems by using the same thinking we used when we created them, because it really speaks to the need to evolve, the need to have vision, the need to invest and do things differently in order to move the needle forward in a way that is both meaningful and impactful. So what is the design approach that we follow here at CA, and certainly most design teams, whether you're in an agency or inside a company, typically follow? These 4 steps, or the variant of them, generally are a common way that design organizations think about in terms of their process. Understand, design, validate, and deliver. So what do we mean by these? Well, understand is probably one of the most important because it sets the foundation. This is really about identifying the problem that you're setting out to solve, as well as who you are solving it for. So who is your audience? What do they care about? What are their needs? What is the value that you are going to bring to them through your solution? Design is ultimately where the rubber hits the road. This is where you're coming up with the ideas and manifesting what your solution is going to look and feel like, how is it going to behave, how is it going to operate, that sort of thing. Validate is an equally important step in that this is really what we call the making sure. So this is typically a prototype. So before you commit to all of the resources and materials necessary to build something out, putting together a prototype, going back to the audience and saying, hey, did we get this right? What is your feedback? And being able to create an iterative solution or process before you commit is an important step. And finally, deliver is really all about execution. And this is working very closely, not only within the design team, but also across the board with whether it's engineering or marketing to make sure your message and communication is all integrated so that when you go out, you have a very tight, holistic experience from when a customer hears about it, how they get introduced to your product, how they use your product is all very seamless. And so the process is very important, certainly across the board, but even more important in the world of SaaS, where things move very quickly and everything is very real time in several regards. One of the most important aspects of SaaS that we'd like to share with you, a few ideas, is around onboarding. And onboarding is simply the process by which a user or a customer is introduced and engages with your particular product. I love this quote by Scott Belsky, who is a partner at Benchmark and the current chief product officer at Adobe. Having to explain your product is the least effective way to engage new users. This is more true than ever with the ever expanding number of products that we as consumers and customers are exposed to every day. And so the more time that you make it difficult for someone to get to the value of the product, the less likely it is they are going to be interested in your product. So with regards to onboarding, there are 5 principles that I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to speak to and to share with you how we think about onboarding. Aaron?
Thank you, Albert. There's 5 principles that we talk about every time that we look at onboarding in a software product. And these principles have been developed by looking at other companies where consumerism has really driven how SaaS has matured over time. And so one of the interesting things that has occurred at companies like CA is bringing in different kinds of talent. Albert and I don't come from an enterprise background. We come from a consumer background. And like yourselves, I bet, show of hands, how many people have seen or heard of Netflix? Yeah, Spotify, Anyone bought anything off of Amazon? Do any of you use Dropbox? Yeah, so pretty much everyone in the room here. So we've taken these principles that we've learned from consumer companies, and we're applying these same principles in the design of onboarding experiences for enterprise software. So the first idea is to build a ladder of engagement. And this is perhaps the most important principle of onboarding. The ladder of engagement is a term that was coined by Josh Ellman, who was a product manager at Twitter at the time. He is now a manager at Greylock Capital and a VC investor. And the ladder of engagement asks users to do a very simple thing and then guides that user to a more important task and then another more important task until you have kind of this big ask, which is the conversion goal. This was used incredibly successfully during Barack Obama's 2012 campaign, when the first thing they asked people to do was just like Barack Obama on Facebook. Then they might have asked him to, on his birthday, to sign a birthday card. And at that point, they got a key piece of information, which was the user's email address. And then from there, they asked the user to maybe donate, do a couple of simpler tasks. And then over time, they built this army of volunteers that would go knock door to door and act as champions for hope and change and propel Barack Obama into his second term at the White House. The next principle is to set expectations. There are so many SaaS products out there, and there's products being released every single day. And so users just aren't going to come into your product and just spend a lot of time tinkering with it. They want to know what they can expect from your product, and more importantly, why it matters to them. What is the business value that this product is going to deliver to them? The next is to engage others. Enterprise software in particular is no longer sold via the steak dinner to one guy that can make the decision. Software has been democratized, and often teams are making decisions on what they want to purchase and use to solve their particular problems. And enterprise software, it's as important to get the team into the collaborative evaluation process as soon as possible. So we make it easy to invite other team members into the product. And we also make the product easy to share across teams. So as one team discovers that this product meets their needs, they could share it with another team and another team and another team until finally you have that big enterprise sale. Our next principle is to follow up early and often. SaaS software for enterprise is a little bit different than consumer software in that there's often necessary but very high friction activities. Some of these things might include installing probes on a server, or punching a hole in a firewall so you can get access to certain data, or learning a new scripting language. So this stuff doesn't happen right away. And it's up to the vendor to frequently contact and keep the relationship alive with the user and help them answer the questions that they're trying to answer for themselves. Does this software solve my immediate problem? How soon is it going to provide me some value? And most importantly, will it make me look like a superhero to my team and to my manager? And the last principle is that we're always onboarding. Onboarding never stops because we are always adding new features to our product, and we can't just expect that our customers, our existing customers, are going to understand that one, this new feature exists, and two, how to use it. As we deploy these advanced capabilities, we continually educate our users and give them opportunities to try things out, even if they don't have the most advanced account. They might be on a starter account, but we want to introduce these features to them that are on the upgrade account so that they might expand their footprint over time. So we might show them a trial and allow them to sample a feature and get a taste for what the more advanced accounts have to offer. And so next, we're going to do some of this ourselves. I'm going to hand over the microphone to Albert here, and he's going to lead you through a co-design exercise.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. All right, so now that we've shared with you a few of the design principles as well as principles for onboarding, what does this actually look like, right? And so we're going to go ahead and design an app. So we're going to actually specifically design the onboarding experience for that app. So let's say it's going to be a mobile app and we're going to target it towards millennials. And it's going to our app is going to allow us to send money to anyone and without the use of checks or paper. Now, this is obviously not something completely new. We use this just as an example to illustrate how something like this might get built, right? And so here is the end state, right? It's this app we're going to call GetCoin. It's going to be very simple, where you just simply key in an amount and hit send, and the recipient has that money that you've sent. So how to go from nothing to an end state like this? And let's walk through that. So the very first step that we're going to do is to understand. So for the sake of time and for the sake of argument, let's just say that we've been able to do that. And we understand what their needs are, who the target audience is, what they struggle with, that sort of thing. And so now, based on that research, we've identified the various steps that it'll take to go from a initial screen of the onboarding all the way to when they're actually using it. So let's do a little game, if you will, where there's a group of you. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you pick the option here that you feel we should include in our prototype that we're going to build, right? So the very first step is to identify who the person is. So we can do this one of three ways. We can do it either through email, through the mobile number, or through the Facebook ID. All right, so now let's by show of hands. Who votes for email? Who votes for mobile number and Facebook ID? All right, so it looks like the Facebook ID folks win. So that we will set that as the very first step in the identifying your customer or who you are. So now that we know who they are, we need to confirm their identity. And there's a couple of ways that we can do that, either through text or email verification, or if you have, for example, an iPhone or one of the new Samsung devices, we could do it through physical verification. So by show of hands, how many want a text or email verification? All right, and how many for the physical verification? All right, it looks like text or email to confirm your identity it is. Okay. So what's the next step? Well, now that we know who you are and we've confirmed who you are, we need to be able to understand, well, where are the funds going to come from, right? This is the big ask, if you will. And there are three options that our designers have come up with. One is you could type in your bank card number. Two, you can scan your bank card. Or three, you can use your bank account info. So how many opt for typing in the bank card number? All right. Scanning the bank card. Wow, that's really popular. And using the bank account info. Okay, so it looks like option 2, scanning the bank card, is the way we're going to identify where funds are going to come from. Next is personalizing it. So this is the attempt here, the idea here is to help make this app feel more like yours. And so there's a few ways that we can do this. One is to simply enter your name and zip code. Maybe it's a nickname that you prefer. The second option is an avatar. And the third is to take a selfie. All right, how many vote for the first one in terms of name and zip code? Okay, how about the avatar? All right, a little bit more popular. And taking a selfie. Okay, this is clearly the most popular option. Let's say we're going to take a selfie. Cool. And now we also want to make it useful, right? We want to, the power of an app like this exists the more people use it, right? So the greater the network, the greater the benefit. And so there are a couple of ways that we can do this. One is through creating a personal URL that you can just share so people can send you money. And the other is a personal QR code. So how many people vote for having a feature to provide a personal URL. All right, and the personal QR code. Great. The personal URL looks like it has a couple more of you preferring that option. Excellent. And finally, we have this idea of inviting others, right? And so again, to the point of the network effect. So two options here. One is through social contacts, like such as Facebook or Twitter. And the other is to use our budget to pay for growth, right? To encourage it. How many go for option one? All right, how many go for option two? All right, looks like social wins. And so that is our choice for this particular phase. Excellent. And so now we're going to show the actual prototype, and Aaron is going to walk through that.
Okay, thanks, Albert. While you guys were voting, I was sitting in the back here, quickly building a prototype based on your choices. This is an industry standard design tool called Sketch, and one of the features it allows us to do is build prototypes and then go ahead and test those with users and then rapidly iterate on the design. So let's take a look at our prototype here. I'll just get into this so everyone can see it. So our first choice for the identify step was to use social login, which is great because a lot of people have a Facebook account. So let's go ahead and tap this. And here we are introducing our first piece of friction. Now, whenever we want to ask for users' information, we do that with great care because most people are skeptical about a company that they don't know about. And so for Gitcoin to function, we're just asking for bare minimum pieces of information here. The user will need to validate this and bounce back to the application here. Now for our second choice, we chose to have a 6-digit verification code emailed to you. And that's based on the email that was supplied by your Facebook account. And so there might be a disconnect here between your Facebook email and the email that you might think is set up with it. That might not be something that users remember. So that's a caution point for choosing to connect those two options together. But let's assume that they have it and they enter their verification code and they go to the next step, which is the big ask. Well, here's another piece of friction. Now, it might seem cool that you could scan a card, but we have to ask for device access. So both Android and Apple require that in order to use a specific hardware feature, that you ask for permission from the user before you can use that feature. So when designing apps, we make very careful decisions about how we ask for device access. And so here we're telling them we're going to scan their debit card. And so we're setting some expectations here. So they say, great, you could scan it. And then this kind of feels like magic. So I'm going to scan that now and it shows my information. I am able to verify it or scan it again if it doesn't look right. And that looks right to me, so I'm going to move on. The next step is to take a selfie, and it tells me that it'll allow my friends to use that information. So I hit OK here. And now I've already given access to the camera, so that doesn't pop up anymore. And so click, take my selfie, and that looks great, so we're going to use that. And the next thing it asks me to do is make it useful by setting up my own URL. And so I'm going to have to read this and kind of grok it for a minute to understand it, because this might be a unique idea to people that I would have a URL that people could send money to. But that sounds pretty useful, so I'm going to go ahead and go through that and click it. And then it shows me an example of the URL, and it automatically copied it to my clipboard. So that reduces friction for the first use of the URL. We just make it easy for people so they don't have to think about, okay, how do I get back to that URL again? Okay, that looks great. And then the last step we chose was for invite was to use social login. So I'm going to use my contacts for login here. And here's another piece of friction. People are very skeptical about sharing their login, so often we are very careful about this ask as well. But now that we've gotten them through so many steps in the process and gotten through the big ask, this is like bonus points for us to get this information. So we say, okay, and we use a little bit of social proof in here. We've already scanned the address book and we show all the friends that are already using Gitcoins by calling them Gitcoiners. And then we make it very easy to just one tap invite any of the friends and then confirm that. And then we're done. You're all set. You could start receiving money. And then we start the process. So that's the feature set that you chose. And now I'm going to show you how that's implemented, that these same concepts are implemented in a CA product called BlazeMeter. BlazeMeter is a performance testing tool that uses JMeter. And here's their onboarding process. It's actually a simpler process than the one that we just went through. It's a couple steps shorter. And let's get into it. So the first thing you'll notice whenever you go to blazemeter.com is the Start Testing Now button. And this button is everywhere. It's in blog posts. It's on every page. It's persistent in the navigation. That's the primary action that we want you to take to start using the product. And when you hit Start Testing, we make it easy to sign up by using one-click login with Google. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. You can enter your name and your email address and sign up. But that's it. All you have to do is enter that information and you're in. And then the first step is very simple. All we ask is that you enter a URL to just sample the idea of testing using the product. So we're going to test ca.com here and we're going to hit Start Test. And it gives you feedback while it's testing. And the test process takes a couple of minutes here, and we just tell you as the test is progressing what's happening. Once the test is finished, you're able to explore a very simple version of your first report here. And once you've explored it, you have the opportunity to create another test with that big button up there, and that's where you can do more sophisticated actions like uploading a JMeter script, or configuring more test options. And the last thing we allow you to do, again, to get your team into this so that they could start experiencing the productivity that JMeter provides, is we make it really easy to invite other users by providing bulk import and bulk invite of users here. And so I could send off a email to all these people on my team, and they could see the report that I just ran. And so that's really how we handle onboarding here at CA. This is what we think a lot about in any of our product discussions, especially for our SaaS products now. And I'd really encourage you to go try out BlazeMeter. It's a great process. Even if you don't know anything about performance testing, you could see how the onboarding process works, and you could think about some of the decisions that we made here. And then if you're really interested in the topic of user onboarding, check out useronboard.com, which has a bunch of different examples and pretty hilarious teardowns of the onboarding process. Thank you very much. We have a few moments for questions if anyone has anything. Okay.